December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor. Could a single decision by a Searchlight operator etch that night into history? The dramatic moments experienced by a young soldier who risked making himself a target against enemy aircraft appearing in the sky will leave you breathless. If you also have stories about the heroes in your family, send them to the email address in the description. Let the world hear their stories too.
On the evening of December 7th, 1941, I was standing guard at my massive searchlight at Pearl Harbor Naval Base in Hawaii. I am Robert Mitchell, a 23-year-old soldier from Amarillo, a small town in Texas. My hair was wheat-colored, my eyes were green, and I stood 6 feet 1 inch tall. My strong build helped me operate the heavy searchlight machinery single-handedly. My hands were calloused and strong from years of working on my father's farm. My childhood years spent in the vast wheat fields of our home in Amarillo had made me physically resilient. That night, my duty was to operate the massive searchlight to illuminate the aircraft runways at the airfield. My searchlight was a tremendous machine mounted on a massive metal base, approximately 10 feet tall. Weighing 3 tons, this beast operated with electric motors and could illuminate the sky across square miles. The buttons and switches on the control panel had to work in harmony like a complex orchestra. Around 11:30 p.m., I was drenched in sweat in Hawaii's hot and humid air. The tropical climate's intense humidity had made my uniform stick to my body. I stood beside my searchlight, scanning the sky to check for any abnormalities. Silence reigned around me, with only the distant sound of Pacific Ocean waves and the occasional footsteps of my fellow soldiers passing by. Palm trees around our airfield swayed silently, the wind creating a gentle rustle in their leaves. None of us thought that war would reach us on these distant lands of the United States. Pearl Harbor seemed peaceful and safe to us. Most of my fellow soldiers viewed this assignment like a vacation, talking about Hawaii's beauties. That night, as I stood at my searchlight, I wondered what my family in Amarillo was doing. Due to the time difference, they must have been having breakfast right now. My mother Martha was probably preparing breakfast in the kitchen, my father Frank getting ready to do morning chores on the farm, and my little sister Emily preparing to go to school. How precious their ordinary, peaceful lives were. At exactly 11:47 p.m., I heard a strange rumble from the distance. At first, I thought it was our own aircraft conducting night training. However, the sound was approaching and carried a different tone. The aircraft engine sound was very different from our B-17 bombers. It came with a sharper, more aggressive whir. My stomach churned and an instinctive alarm bell began ringing. I gripped my searchlight's control levers tightly and turned the light toward the direction of the sound. When the massive light beam swept the sky, it reflected off metal parts and pierced through the midnight darkness. The scene I witnessed at that moment was a sight I would never forget for the rest of my life. Foreign aircraft had appeared in the sky, flying at low altitude. The red sun markings on their wings were clearly visible under my light. The aircraft fuselages bore Japanese military markings and were at low altitude, as if preparing for an attack. My heart began beating wildly, and my palms became sweaty. The inside of my mouth had dried up, my tongue stuck to my palate. These were Japanese aircraft, and they were attacking American soil. A situation I couldn't imagine, couldn't even dream of, was happening. The first thing that came to mind at that moment was my family in Amarillo. My mother Martha's worried face, my father Frank's protective gaze, and my little sister Emily's innocent smile flashed before my eyes. Would I be able to embrace them again? Would I survive this night? I directed my searchlight beam onto the enemy aircraft. The massive light beam created such brilliant illumination that it turned night into day. The light's intensity was so strong that the aircraft's metal fuselages sparkled like mirrors. The aircraft pilots, disturbed by this sudden light attack, had their eyes dazzled and began changing their routes. Some tried to escape to the right, some to the left. Their formation arrangements were disrupted. However, at the same time, I had also exposed my position. Standing at the searchlight, I had now become a bright target for the enemy. The light beam showed me exactly, and the Japanese pilots wouldn't miss this opportunity. The first bomb fell about 100 yards from my searchlight. The explosion's sound deafened my ears, and the shock nearly knocked me off my feet. Soil and metal fragments scattered around me like a small meteor shower. The explosion's flash was even brighter than my searchlight's beam, and caused pain to my retinas. The smell of burnt gunpowder filled my nostrils, and I began coughing. Under normal circumstances, any soldier would have run for shelter in this situation. However, I couldn't abandon my searchlight, because thanks to this light, our own aircraft could see the enemy. Aircraft at our airfield could make emergency takeoffs, and I could save my comrades' lives. My father Frank's words echoed in my ears. "Son, running from your duty in difficult times is not expected of a man." The second bomb fell closer. This time my searchlight's metal base shook and electrical cables began sparking. I could feel the heavy machine trembling. A metal fragment grazed my left shoulder, and I felt a hot pain. A blood stain had formed on me, creating a wet and sticky sensation. However, my hands were still on the searchlight's control levers as if glued there. Enemy aircraft were continuously bombing to silence me. The pilots had understood how much the searchlight beam was disturbing them and had decided to target me. However, I wouldn't take the light off them. With each attack, my searchlight was forced to retreat a step, but I was resisting. At that moment, I saw a comrade running from the distance. Danny O'Brien was a 20-year-old soldier from Boston, with red hair and a freckled face. Danny, who was shorter than me, was known for his agile movements. He came from an Irish origin family, and the slight Boston accent in his speech distinguished him from other soldiers. His green eyes usually sparkled cheerfully, but that night they were filled with fear. His uniform was drenched in sweat, and he was running breathlessly. As he ran toward me, he shouted at the top of his voice, "Robert, get away from there. They've targeted you. You'll die there." The desperation and concern in his voice showed how dangerous a situation I was in. However, I replied to him, "Danny, I can't leave. Without this light, the aircraft at our airfield will be blind. Our comrades will die." The worried expression on Danny's face clearly showed how risky my decision was. He paused for a moment, assessed the situation. He too had grasped the critical importance of the searchlight, understood the dilemma. "Well," shouted Danny, "then I'll stay by your side, too." With these words, he crouched behind the additional ammunition boxes next to my searchlight. Having my friend beside me gave me great confidence. I was no longer alone. The third bomb fell only 50 yards from my searchlight. In this explosion, blood began flowing from my right ear, and the world spun. My searchlight's metal base had cracked, but the machine was still working. A large crater had opened in the reinforced concrete ground, surrounded by rubble and debris. However, the searchlight was still working, and I wouldn't abandon it. My vision had become smoky and blurry, but I continued to keep the light beam on the enemy aircraft. American fighter aircraft were now beginning to appear in the sky. Thanks to my light, they could see the enemy aircraft and engage them. At that moment, sirens began to be heard from the distance. The entire base had gone to alert status. My fellow soldiers were running to battle positions. Anti-aircraft gun batteries had begun firing. The sky was filled with tracer bullet lights, like a giant fireworks display. However, this beauty was part of a deadly dance. It was past midnight. The attack had lasted approximately 35 minutes, but it felt like hours to me. Sweat and blood from my body had mixed. My uniform was riddled with holes. When the last Japanese aircraft moved away, I turned off my searchlight and collapsed to the ground. My body was shaking. My breathing was coming in short gasps. My surroundings were filled with debris, but my searchlight was still standing. I had completed my mission. Danny ran to my side. His face bore an expression mixing concern and admiration. When he approached me, I saw his eyes welling up. "Robert," he said with a trembling voice, "you're a hero tonight. Thanks to that light, you saved the lives of many of our comrades." At that moment, I remembered the values I had received from my family in Texas. My father Frank always used to tell me when I was little, "Son, doing your duty in difficult times makes you a real man." Even when dealing with sick animals on cold winter days at our farm in Amarillo, he had taught me to show the same determination. "Giving up is easy," he would say, "but enduring, that shows character." That night I had fully grasped the meaning of his words. Standing at that searchlight at Pearl Harbor, I wasn't just doing a job. I was defending America's values, the principles I had received from my family. That night, I had lived the true meaning of being an American. Despite being wounded, I felt an indescribable pride within me. I was just a searchlight operator, but that night I had made an important difference for the United States. The blood on my hands, the soot stains on my face, and my torn uniform were a warrior's medals. The next day I learned that thanks to my light, 5 American fighter aircraft had made emergency takeoffs and shot down 3 enemy aircraft. Additionally, my searchlight beam had confused the enemy pilots and disrupted their targeting capability. Thanks to this, damage at our airfield was kept to a minimum. While being treated at the hospital, my commander, Colonel Harrison, came. He was a tall, white-haired, serious-faced man. The wrinkles on his face bore the traces of years spent in military service. His eyes were blue and sharp-looking, but that day they carried a soft expression. His uniform with medals showed that he was an experienced commander. Standing by my bedside, he shook my hand and spoke in a strong voice. "Soldier Mitchell," he said, "what you did last night is the definition of true heroism. You saved your comrades' lives by disregarding your own safety. We are proud of you." A few days later, while lying in the hospital, Nurse Margaret Peterson told me that a special visitor had come for me. Margaret was a woman in her 30s with brown hair and kind eyes. She was from Hawaii's local population and worked as a volunteer at the military hospital. An elderly man entered the room with a letter in his hand. He introduced himself as Pilot Captain William Rogers. This medium-height, brown-haired, Serious-looking man was one of the pilots who had been able to make an emergency takeoff thanks to my searchlight that night. There were traces of fatigue on his face, but deep gratitude sparkled in his eyes. "Soldier Mitchell," he said while shaking my hand, "if it weren't for your light that night, I wouldn't have been able to get to my aircraft. You saved my life. Now I can return home to my wife Susan in San Francisco and my 2 children. I will never forget this gratitude." His eyes had welled up, and the emotion in his voice had deeply affected me. During my days in the hospital, many visitors came. My fellow soldiers, my commanders, and even people from the civilian population I didn't know. An elderly Hawaiian man had come with his daughter and grandson, bringing a traditional gift. "Mahalo nui loa," he had said, which means great thanks in Hawaiian.
Robert Mitchell's brave heart that lived through that night had written one of the most dramatic moments of the Pearl Harbor attack. A searchlight beam and a soldier's determination is just one of the heroism stories that left marks in history. Such sacrifice stories show the true source of America's strength in war. Your family surely has stories of heroes too. Don't forget to share them with us.